Welcome to Forza 6 Drift Battle, where I pit two cars against one another, choose a track, and I've got 10 laps to build, test, and tune them, and then I'll put down a lap number, and I'll use that, as well as how easy they are to drift, and how fun they are to drift, to decide a winner. And for the first competitor in the Forza 6 Drift Battle, we've got the R34 GTR. Now this is one of the unicorns of the car world. They're not even street legal in the United States. But even in places where they are street legal, you almost never see the GTR, and its rarity is why it's such a cool car. Now obviously for the purposes of this challenge, it has been converted to rear-wheel drive, and it should be interesting to see how that affects the results of the battle. This thing is obviously normally set up for all-wheel drive, so it might affect the steering of the car, and it also might affect how stable it is since it doesn't have power going to the front wheels. And for the second competitor, we've got the S15 Silvia, another Nissan and another unicorn of the car world. Now this car isn't quite as rare as the R34 GTR, but it is still very difficult to find. What this has going for it is it's a rear-wheel drive chassis only, and that might actually help it out when it comes to chassis balance once these two are actually tuned. Many consider this to be more of the purist's car because of that. Also, the car is much lighter than the R34, and lightweight is always a good thing. Now I know you guys have not come here to watch these two try to battle it out and basically stock tune. So I think it's time we got these two into drift missile trim.
Woke up and just felt right, phone blown like a tailpipe. Today's schedule airtight, it turn a short day into a long night. See you soon if you got the heart, meet you outside Rennie Park. Hurry up if it's getting dark, won't say much and that says a lot. Hop into that old bands, drive through where that road ends. Good time with some old friends, they got just a thing if you so tense. Burn one, let's go do some, she got me stoned as Medusa. Zoned out with a blank stare, I'm looking into the future. Hold up, ain't nothing gon' hold us, put the devil to the side, got an angel on my shoulder, and I'm like, hello, it's good to finally let go. I ain't worried about a thing, I just like to keep it mellow. Yeah, I like to keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. And I'm bored again. When that 40 in, when that dream team all played out and they hit the bench, I just step back, let me soak it in. I seen the ups and downs, so I get it in. I was born to win. It's my time, about time, my turn, I can't lie. Waiting for that one spark, my one hope to catch fire. I'm fine, I'm high, like rain through that sunshine. Trying to man this so bold, I'm the captain man when it's crunch time. I don't care if I'm getting paid, need the week, but I get the day. Wide awake when I need sleep, I'm knee deep, but I set the way. Focused on that one mistake, let it free, don't let it break. Fuck it all, I'm turning in, my cellies off, the great escape. Hold up, ain't nothing gon' hold us, put the devil to the side, got an angel on my shoulder, and I'm like, hello, it's good to finally let go. I ain't worried about a thing, I just like to keep it mellow. Yeah, I like to keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow.
Now if you guys have watched my videos in the past, you may have seen this car. It actually came second in my top 10 drift cars of Forza 6, only to the CTSV. The main reason that I cited why it came second was because it was a very difficult car to drift, and that hasn't really changed. It took me a lot longer to get this dialed in than the S15. You actually saw me put a much more neutral tune on this to try and get a little bit more front end bite. Now, what happens when you do that is there's a lot more movement in the front end of the car because it doesn't have as much understeer dialed in, and more movement means less stability. The reason I think that happened was because the all-wheel drive system normally lends more stability to the front end of the car since it has power going to the front wheels, but without that, the car wasn't really prepared to deal with the rear-wheel drive conversion, and I think that may hurt it when it comes to the ease of driving part of the challenge. Now, the S15 was on the opposite side of the spectrum. I thought it was a much easier car to drift right out of the gate, and it didn't really take me that long to get a decent bass tune on it. It did take a little while to get it dialed into where I liked it, but it was nowhere near as difficult as the R34. Now, one place this car I think is going to fall short is the engine. The R34 had a much more powerful and much more torquey engine, which made it perform better in high-speed turns. In this car's case, it was both a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because it made the car a lot more stable and a lot easier to drift, since down low it didn't have a whole lot of torque, and because of that it didn't have a whole lot of movement. But I think that lack of torque is going to hurt it a lot in the drift lap. Now, I think it's time we finally got around to putting these two cars head to head, so let's see which one puts down a better lap. Now, the R34 won that, but I feel like, to me, it was kind of expected. The R34 is a beast when it comes to putting down points, but those were two very different laps, and I think looking at the main sequence really illustrates the difference in these two cars. Both of them are kind of moving around, but you can see the R34 do what I call bouncing a lot more. The front end is moving in and out of angle a lot more severely than the S15, and I think it comes down to how much more understeer the S15 has dialed in. But one thing you will notice about the GTR is it generally has more angle going into the turn. While it does bounce around a lot more, it's consistently at more of an angle than the S15, and it's actually able to place itself on the track a lot better. And I think the main reason is because of the power difference between the two cars. The R34's down low torque really made it a lot easier to place the car on the track, even if overall the car was more difficult to drift. Now I think it'll be easier to see with a visual representation of what the difference in the power is. The torque under the curve is what really matters, and you can see in the middle the R34 has a much taller torque curve, and it's a lot broader than the S15, and that's what you feel when you drift. And that's why I feel like the R34 really was able to pull ahead of the S15 when it comes to the point section. But the points was only one part of this competition, and I think it's easy to say the winner of the ease of drifting competition was the S15. It was so much more stable and so much more consistent, I couldn't really even think about putting the R34 in this slot. The S15 was just so much easier to drive. It wanted to drift with you, and it didn't really fight you all that much, even when it wasn't tuned. The car just likes drifting. It's very stable and a solid drift car. I enjoyed drifting it a lot because it was easy. But that kind of takes something away from the drifting experience too. It was such an easy car to drift, I didn't get the sense of satisfaction that I really want out of a drift car. And because of that, I can't say it won the fun to drive. I have to give that to the R34. While the R34 was a lot more difficult to drift, because of that, it was also a lot more rewarding. Whenever you completed a good lap, it felt like you had just wrestled one of the hardest cars there in the game to drift, and that's because you kind of did. The R34 just made you feel like you were a badass when you hit a turn right, because there isn't drifting this car well on accident. If you drift this car well for an entire lap, it's because you worked your ass off and you put it down. So I feel like the R34 just kind of has to take that part of the competition because it rewards its driver, and I feel a more rewarding car is also a more fun car. The fact that it's probably one of the rarest cars in the world doesn't hurt. So I think it's safe to say the winner of the very first Forza 6 drift battle is the R34 GTR. Now, I thought this was actually going to be a wipe by the R34. I thought it was going to run away with this, but in reality, it really didn't. The S15 was very, very close to beating it because it was so much easier to drive. I think if it was a little more difficult to drive and it had a little bit more torque, I think it might have actually beaten the R34. And while you can engine swap, I wanted to keep the stock engines for this competition, since for the most part you can put the same engine in both cars. And I think the engines are part of the character of these two cars. But the R34's points potential, which is significantly higher than the S15's, and the fact that it rewards you so much more for drifting well, kinda has to take home the prize. But that's not to say the S15 is a bad drift car. It's actually a very good one, and I enjoyed driving it a lot. But the R34 is just more my cup of tea. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the first episode of the Forza 6 Drift Battle. Please comment below and tell me what matchups you guys want to see in the future. I've got a few in mind, but I think this is a great way to see what you guys want to see. Also, feel free to do more of these on your own. I want to see what you guys think about these cars. So thank you all very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like or a dislike depending on what you thought. Subscribe if you want more. And I will see you all in the next video.
Yeah, I like to keep it mellow. I smoke and keep it mellow. I drink and keep it mellow. Every day I keep it mellow.